If you want perfect health, you must have perfect circulation. But perfect circulation consists of a number of things. We'll be talking about that in this program.
Welcome to Help Yourself to Health with Dr. Agatha Thrash of Uchee Pines Institute. And now, here's your host, Dr. Thrash.
Perfect circulation underlies all good health, and therefore, we should study those things having to do with perfect circulation so that we can cooperate with the forces of nature and also with those things that have been built into us. The heart must be healthy. We must have a good, firm pumping action so that a good head of pressure can get on the blood to take it throughout the body. Then we need a good transit system. We need blood vessels that both take the blood away from the heart and bring it back to the heart so that we can have no impedance to the perfect flow of the blood. But one of those things that I like the most is that of the chemistry. Now, the chemistry of the blood is the most complex part, in my opinion. How difficult it must have been when the Lord was making blood for Him to make all the varied kinds of things that must go to make up good blood. For instance, we must have proper cells. We must also have proper nutrients. It's the vehicle on which we carry enzymes and hormones and proteins and antibodies and many other most important things to make up good health. But I think that one of the most precious parts are those parts that have to do with the crystalline part of the blood. Of course, these crystals are not in the beginning in crystalline form as a general rule. Most of the time they're dissolved, but we can crystallize them and take a look at them. And I would like to show you one of the most beautiful of those crystalline structures in the blood, and that is ferritin, blood ferritin. Here you see on the screen a crystal of ferritin. Notice that it has 6 sides. Notice also that it has a very delicate amber color. This amber color of the ferritin denotes the fact that it is from iron, since much of iron has a sort of amber color in the salt form. And so we can look at this and see the beauty of things that are even submicroscopic. And it's very nice when we take a look at these beautiful things and recognize that God has made them even there so that they are beautiful. Anywhere we look in nature, we see things that are beautiful. And it was not God's intention that our eyes should ever fall on anything that isn't of the most beautiful nature, not even if we're looking at things on a very small level like serum ferritin. Now, from a university in Finland, one of those very fine reports came out showing that while ferritin is an important substance in the blood, there is also an aspect of ferritin that is not good, and it is like most of life. There is that is too much and that is too little. And they found at the University of Kuopio that in Finland that if a person has too much iron or ferritin stored in the plasma or stored in the tissues in the form of crystalline blood, that it increases one's risk of getting an acute myocardial infarction or a heart attack, a little place in the heart where the muscle has actually died. Usually it's caused by either a clotting in one of the arteries or it's caused by a gradual closure of that artery made by the buildup of substances inside the artery, such as fat and a ground substance. The researchers at the university in Finland found that people who go down to the Red Cross frequently and give their blood make donations to a blood bank, that they tend to be more healthy than do other people because it reduces some excess of ferritin that we tend to accumulate in the body. One of the reasons why we accumulate these iron salts is because of tension or stress. Under stress, we tend to take up more iron from the blood. Ordinarily, we only take up 5% of the iron that we have in the food that we eat. But under cases of anemia or hemorrhage, we'll take up quite a bit more of the iron in the food that we eat. And stress also makes it so that we take up much more iron. Now, recently published in Southern Medical Association Journal, there was a very fine article on the overload of iron in the liver. If a person continues to take iron pills far beyond the time that they need to take the pills just to bring the hemoglobin back up to a fine level, if one continues to take more and more iron for years, then it tends to be stored in various tissues. One of those is the liver. It can also be stored in the pancreas and various other things in the body, muscles, and even in the skin. And in this way, it can make a big problem for the body because this kind of storage is irritating to tissues and can actually cause tissues to die. Now, another thing that makes blood healthy or unhealthy is the kind of fats that we have in the blood. Fats are generally of two kinds, cholesterol and triglycerides. Triglycerides are of the same general type of fat that we store in the subcutaneous tissue and various other parts of the body. Here is a story about low LDL or HDL. Low HDL is a problem for the body because HDL is a carrier type of cholesterol that carries LDL, which is the least favorable form of those two cholesterols, HDL and LDL. This tells about the benefits of HDL. Now, when you think about HDL, the very next question is, what can I do to make the HDL rise a little bit? Well, there are a number of things. One is cut down on the free fats in your food, things like margarine and mayonnaise. Those things can be cut down rather markedly, and especially if you have a very high LDL and if your HDL is low. Now, if your HDL is below 35, that's the critical level. And I like to see the HDL above 50. That, of course, represents very excellent levels of HDL. And so, if your HDL, if you get your lab test results back from your annual laboratory testing and you find that it's below 35 or even well below 50, you may want to work on that rather diligently. Exercise is another very important thing. Reducing your stresses, getting plenty of sleep, being on a regular program, all of these kinds of things will help you with that. Then here is a very nice study. This came from California, from Berkeley, the Department of Health Services. And it tells about social functioning and the overall mortality that people suffer. When we think about these things, about social interactions, we are of course immediately drawn to the very perfect way that our divine designer has put social things together. He has made it so that the basic unit of social functioning is the home. Another very basic unit is the church, and another the school. And actually, life can revolve around these three social units and be quite successful without any other form of social unit, although there are many other very nice social units that people can be members of that can help. Let me just read a part of the abstract from this very fine report from Berkeley. Ischemic heart disease, that's heart disease caused by too little oxygen in the blood. Ischemic heart disease risk factor study in men, it was found that they were at risk of early death if they reported few persons to whom they gave or received social support, if they were non-participants in various organizations, low quality of social relationships, a small number of friends, or whether or not they had a give and take type of relationship in these kinds of units. Then, if they had to use certain instruments in their support when they were troubled in some way, that also was associated with an increased risk. And some of these instruments that people use are such things as alcohol, or joining some kind of improper social group, such as at bars or in the occult, or various areas where people can become involved in things that have stress in them just on the very basis of the unit itself. There is a growing body of medical literature linking mortality risk with social malfunctioning. And so again, we see that our great divine designer has done a very wonderful thing for us in arranging society in the way that he has. Now, I would like to show another thing for you, and this is the way that blood fats can be deposited actually in the skin. We have certain select areas where fats are generally deposited. Of course, in the subcutaneous tissue, some people deposit these fats out front, some behind or below or above. It just depends on the type of genetics that the person has where body fat is stored. But blood fats are also sometimes stored in the skin. And one of the places that the body shows a predilection for in depositing these fats is in the eyelids. So I'd like to show you a xanthelasma. The xanthelasmas that occur in the eyelids can occur in either the upper eyelid or in the lower lid. And you will see this shown on your screen just now. Here you see a xanthelasma. In the upper lid, it's a little plaque which you can easily see is sharply demarcated, and yet down below in the lower lid you can see just a hint of a xanthelasma there. That's another very favored place that the body pushes cholesterol and other fats when the cholesterol level is too high. If you see this kind of thing in the skin anywhere, it can sometimes be in the palm. I've seen them scattered over the skin in many different places. But the most favored spot is that of the upper eyelid. Now, I'd like to go to another topic, and that is the topic of exercise and its anticoagulant effect. As you know, there are many drugs that are given to make it so that people won't clot their blood inside their blood vessels, but there are also some very simple things that a person can do. One is reduce the total number of fats in your meals. If you do that, that all by itself reduces the likelihood that you will clot your blood inside your blood vessels. Then there are certain foods that you can eat. Garlic is one of those. It has been shown that garlic has the anti-platelet stickiness factor, so that platelets, which have to do with blood clotting, are not so likely to stick together. They're also not so likely to stick to the blood vessel walls, which immediately makes the body undergo a reaction which initiates a blood clot. So the use of garlic in the diet is a very good one, and I appreciate the studies that have been done recently to show the very excellent effect that garlic has on the blood clotting mechanism. This makes it so that we do not need to be dependent on drugs such as aspirin to keep the blood from clotting inside the blood vessels. Lower the fat, Eat garlic if you know you're particularly susceptible to clotting. And then another thing that has been shown to be very important is that of exercise. And here from a public health department also in Finland has been shown that moderate to high intensity leisure time activity or physical activity and a high level of cardiorespiratory fitness are associated with reduced plasma fibrinogen. Now, fibrinogen is one of those factors in the blood that encourages or causes the onset of clotting. And so anything that we can do that will reduce fibrinogen or reduce any of the other factors having to do with blood clotting, this would of course reduce the likelihood that a person would need to take any kind of anticoagulant. Here is another one that shows that the researchers who did this particular study, also on exercise and its reducing serum factors that can encourage clotting. This time they found that exercise will reduce blood fats. Let me just read a sentence from this abstract. Their data provided further confirmation for the concept that both regular or at least moderate intensity leisure time physical activity and occupational physical activity have a favorable impact on serum lipids. Now, lipids are fats, the kind that we've mentioned, triglycerides and cholesterol. And so with the use of exercise, we can feel that we're doing what we can to try to make the blood be in its very best condition. We mentioned garlic as being one of those dietary factors that one can have that will make the blood be healthier and kept in good condition. And here is a very good study done at the University of Toronto that shows that if a person uses flaxseed, that can also keep blood lipids or cholesterol in good condition. Now, flaxseed is a staple article of food in many places in the Middle East, but in the United States we have not developed a taste for flaxseed as much as we should. And I think it would be very helpful if we would encourage people to use flaxseed in the making of various breads and crackers and cereals. Flaxseed go very well with these kinds of foods, and it would be very good if we did. The study that's reported here in 1995 in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that if a person took between 3 and 4 tablespoons of flaxseed a day for only 4 weeks, that this would have a very favorable influence on the blood cholesterol. They found that the blood cholesterol could be reduced up to 8% by just this measure alone. That means if your blood cholesterol is 220, that if you take 3 to 4 tablespoons of flaxseed a day, you should be able to reduce your blood cholesterol down to around 200 in only about 4 weeks. Well, of course, that's quite important. And another plus factor on that is that the number of bowel movements that people had who were in this program increased 30% during the time they were on the flaxseed diet. So of course that's another very important aspect of staying in good health and also having very good circulation. A study that was reported in Psychosomatic Medicine in November-December of 1994 showed that the production of carotid artery plaques with the buildup inside of the arteries, of hardening of the arteries, that this could be very favorably influenced, and that if you didn't take certain measures, that it was likely that you would increase the buildup and increase the rate at which blood vessels close off or get very tight. What these researchers found was that the level of hostility and the expressed anger that people had would tend to encourage the progression of the buildup of blood fats and so forth in the carotid arteries. And of course, they're essential blood vessels that go to the brain. They measured such levels as cynical distrust, impatience, irritability, and various expressions of anger. And they found that the cholesterol concentration was also associated with such things as smoking and the use of alcohol. They looked at a twofold increase in the progressive coronary artery closure in those who were highly cynical and who had high anger expression. And so we can say that what we have in the book of Proverbs, that we should not yell and scream and express our anger. We should instead pray and ask the Lord to help us to avoid anger, not to have anger. And our feelings can be controlled as we pray and as we yield the life to the Lord and avoid things like hostility and the expression of anger. Now, I have a plant that I would like to show you, since few people know what this plant is. It's called ginkgo, and it's spelled a little unusually, Ginkgo. This nice plant is a beautiful tree. You'll find it as ornamentals in various people's yards and in parks. I have several of these trees growing very near to my home, one right in my yard. And so I have picked some of these leaves so that I can show these to you. And I'd like to pick one leaf to show you how it gets its name. It's called ginkgo biloba, and I have a close-up of this that I would like to show to you. You can see there that this has a very beautiful yellowish gold color. And this yellow gold color is the perfect color for the plucking of these leaves at the time of drying them, so that they can be used as a tea. Now, of course, the use of ginkgo as a tea, since it is a leaf, then we'll want to not boil it, but just steep it. So gather these leaves when the color has developed a beautiful golden color. And then they can be dried in the shade. Don't dry leaves for the making of herbal drinks in the sun, because that destroys some of the properties of it. But it has been found that ginkgo gives an elasticity to the circulation. It has certain substances in it that make the blood vessels have a much greater elasticity. It also widens blood vessels in certain critical areas, like those going to the brain. It decreases the rate at which memory is lost. Isn't that good news? And so if people begin to lose the memory, we will often tell them that they should take ginkgo. And ginkgo is not a bad tasting drink, and it certainly does wonders for the person. Now, here is a study that was done at the University of California in Berkeley, showing that ginkgo biloba gets its name biloba because of those two lobes of the leaves. This kind of tea with an extract of that made by pouring very hot water over the dried leaves. It is used for treating peripheral vascular diseases and cerebrovascular insufficiency. They found, and I will read certain things from the abstract, it says it affords a protection against oxidative damage in all the systems we analyzed. That was to quote the researchers. Thus, it is an efficient scavenger of peroxyl radicals. Now, you've doubtless been hearing or reading about peroxides and the free radical damage that peroxides induce, and here is something that can help us not to have so much damage from this. It says it supports the hypothesis of an antioxidant therapeutic action of ginkgo biloba. And so if you find your memory being a little bit less than you would like it to be, you may wish to try some ginkgo biloba. It's easily available in health food stores. Here is another story, another report done by the same group of researchers. It shows that it has a potential therapeutic effect in conditions in which nitric oxide is altered. Now, nitric oxide is a substance that relaxes blood vessels and therefore would have a beneficial effect on the blood pressure. And so people who have a blood pressure problem or those who have vascular problems, they can take the ginkgo biloba and expect that they can get a very good effect from that. Now, generally speaking, the outside world, the world in which we live, is we think of it as being friendly. But there are some things that are not so friendly as others, and one of those is salt. And here we have a salt shaker. This salt shaker is capable of making food taste better. And for Southerners, we really like our salt. We want everything laced very heavily with salt. But some researchers in Tokyo found that the use of a lot of salt is not good for people. In fact, it causes lipid peroxidation. This is the same kind of thing we were just talking about concerning ginkgo. So if salt increases peroxidation and the formation of peroxides with the free radical connections that it has, then of course we would want to avoid salt as much as we can. We can say, actually, that salt is an oxidant. Now, an oxidant is something that causes a progression of aging in the body, and we hear a lot about antioxidants today, like beta-carotene and alpha-carotene. We find these in our foods. So we want to be very careful not to undo the beneficial results of eating nice fruits and vegetables and whole grains that have in them antioxidants by overusing salt. Now, the level of salt that the researchers used was 4% salt in the experiment that they did, but we can use just 2% salt as we have in peanut butter, and it's still plenty salty.